This is Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, a podcast and radio program presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan.
Driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
And now, here he is, your host, Jim Ervin.
Well, thank you so much, Parker, and welcome to Time Signatures. I'm your host, Jim Ervin, and I'm pleased to welcome not one, but two of Detroit's finest musicians, period. The legendary Jim McCarty is perhaps best known for his part of Mitch Ryder in the Detroit Wheels, but he also holds a distinction of having recorded with the likes of Jimi Hendricks and Bob Seger, and he was also part of several well-known bands, including the Buddy Miles Express, Cactus, the Rockets, and these days with Mystery Train, where his son Dylan plays drums. As for my other guest, I recently read an interview, and the headline truly sums Pat Smillie up best. Pat Smillie sounds like Detroit. He's got that Joe Cocker, Bob Seger-esque, throaty as hell, take no prisoners sound, and he has spent considerable time in Chicago, but is now back in Detroit. And these two blues rockers are going to be headlining at this year's Michigan BluesFest in Lansing, Michigan. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't be more pleased. Gentlemen, welcome to Time Signatures, and we sure are looking forward to having you guys on stage.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
We're looking forward to being there.
Absolutely. Guys, I want to get going because we've got so much ground to cover, but I'd like to start talking just a little bit about where you guys got your first taste of musical memories. I mean, Jim, where do you first remember hearing music, and how did it play in your life?
Oh, well, I was about 2 years old. My father was a drummer back in the big band days. And so music was a part of our household, you know, from the time I was born. I started playing drums when I was about 3 years old.
Wow.
And took actual drum lessons, more jazz than anything else, for about 5 years. And strangely enough, or funnily enough, it wasn't until the second Mitch Ryder and Detroit Wheels hit record, Devil with a Blue Dress, that I decided, well, I guess I'll be a guitar player. Up until then, I still considered myself a drummer.
Wow.
Well, music was pretty much from the time I, was born. The music was there for me.
Sure. Pat, how about you, man?
Well, for me, I remember I was more of a listener and a fan. And I remember being about 6 or 7 years old, driving to hockey practice with my dad. My dad was kind of a rock and roller. And but he went back to, he loved Elvis and Little Richard and Everly Brothers. But so we would drive to practice, listen to the oldie stations, and I fell in love with a lot of doo-wop and R&B kind of music. I remember Mitch and the Wheels coming on with Jenny Take a Ride, CC Ryder. I just assumed Mitch was a black artist, And then I finally saw pictures. I'm like, wow, all right, this is a white guy with soul and a killer band behind him. So
right,
it was more of listening and collecting music at first,
Very cool. Now, Jim, at what point in your life did you realize that music was going to be the path that you would take in life?
Maybe not consciously, but I think basically my whole life. Mitch Ryder, we went to New York. The band was originally called Billy Lee and the Rivieras, and we were making some noise in the Detroit area. And one of the disc jockeys here in Detroit, Dave Prince, contacted Bob Crew in New York, a producer. And we went to New York basically right out of high school. Johnny, the drummer, Johnny B, was about 16 years old. He quit high school.
Wow.
So we went to New York. So
did you guys pack everything you had?
Yeah.
Everything you owned.
But it was like at that point in time, I just, whether it was consciously or not, there was nothing else but music for me. That was basically it. There wasn't any other consideration. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, sir.
So
how about you, Pat?
Well, I mean, I love music. I probably joined my first band when I was 16. I probably started making music with the neighborhood hoodlums when I was 12 or 13, and then joined a band. I'm just a guitar player friend of mine. We'd plug a mic into one of the inputs of his amp and his guitar in the other, and we just go crazy. But I joined my first band, I think, in high school. And when I moved out to Chicago was probably when I first went pro and started doing gigs and playing more, as often as I could, really.
Sure. Well, Jim, you have the distinction of having played with and recorded with the late Jimi Hendrix. Now, that's not just an average topic for discussion. This is something truly incredible. I'd love to hear a little about that experience from you.
Yeah, I've mentioned that on more than one occasion in different interviews down through the years. There were a lot of great guitar players back there. And, Clapton, Jeff Beck, Mike Bloomfield, who was a friend of mine. And then there was Hendrix. You understand what I'm saying? And yes, everybody knew it. This guy wasn't just somebody who was really good. He was one of those rare people that changed the parameters of what we were doing. Whether it's a John Coltrane, a Miles Davis, Louis Armstrong inventing improvisational music with the Hot Fives in the 20s. These are people that redefine what we're doing. And Hendrix was one of those people.
Now, I have to ask you, if he were still with us today, where do you suppose his music would have evolved to? Any guesses?
Well, he got tired of the Foxy Lady, Purple Haze thing, which is kind of what everybody expected from him.
Sure.
And he wanted to take his psychedelic thing, but with a more R&B rhythm section. He took a lot of flack back in those days for playing with white guys from the Black Brothers, back in those days. And it was something he was conscious of. And he was tired of doing Purple Haze and Foxy Lady, but this is what people expected from him.
Sure.
And I don't want to go into detail, but I mean, there was a lot of drugs and stuff back in those days. And if you might have been a little more clear-headed. I saw him in London 3 days before, maybe 2 or 3 days before he died.
Oh, wow.
I was staying at a friend's place, and he came over to see her. And then when I got back to New York, Tim Bogart told me, I just heard on the radio that Hendrix is dead. But
wow,
it's hard to say exactly where he would have went, but I had talked to him on a couple. I was fortunate enough, I was playing with the Buddy Miles Express. So Jimmy was coming around a lot because he was talking to Buddy about he wanted to put a band together with Buddy Miles, which he eventually did. So we were bumping into each other a lot. And when the clubs would close at 4 o'clock in the morning, we would go back to the record plant and jam until the sun came up. Jimmy loved to play. So I was fortunate in that regard that I had, I was able to see him a fair amount because I was with the Buddy Miles Express.
What was he like as a producer? Because didn't he produce some of those tracks for you guys?
The what now?
Didn't Jimmy produce some of the Buddy Miles tracks?
He did, yeah. That's the second Buddy Miles album. He produced half of it. He came in the studio and produced half. A girl named Ann Tansey produced the other half. That was for Mercury Records, I believe. Yeah, that was an interesting experience. Being out in the studio to do a guitar overdub, and you got Hendrix's voice coming through. All right, Jim, we're going to punch in on the bridge now. Okay, Jimmy.
What was that like working with him as a producer?
It was very cool. He's a very relaxed guy. He really dug Mitch, Ryder, and Detroit Wheels. So we had kind of a bond there.
Very cool. Now, I was reading an interview with Ted Nugent, and he compared you and your musical prowess to the likes of Bo Diddley, Chuck Berry, and the legendary Les Paul. That's some pretty damn good company,
Ted can get a little too flamboyant. I'm glad he thinks I'm a good guitar player, but I'm not sure that Chuck Berry, Ted cites Mitch Ryder and Detroit Wheels. If he had to pick one band, that would probably be his all-time favorite group. So down through the years, he's had nothing but good things to say about me. But as far as a comparison to Chuck Berry, I think Ted needs to regroup.
All right, Pat, I'm going to get you in here, man. I want to hear your story of how you met Jim, What were the circumstances? And what was that first meeting like, man?
Sure. So I'll start by saying
that place over in Birmingham,
called Edison's.
The downstairs place.
This is a cigar bar, Edison's.
That was the first time you brought me your first CD.
Yeah. So I was living in Chicago at the time, and it was around the holidays, Thanksgiving, I believe. I would come in for weekends. My mom was a caretaker for my grandmother, and sometimes my mom would just need a break, so I'd come in for a couple of days and let her. And I'd watch Grandma. And I say, if Grandma was having a good night, I'd say, Grandma, you care if I go sneak out and go see some music? And she's like, go ahead. So I've been a fan of Jim's and the Rockets since I was probably 10 or 11 years old.
Wow.
And I was keeping tabs of all the guys individually, kind of, and I saw Jim was and Mystery Train were advertised to be playing at this bar in Birmingham. So I drove out there one night. This was in 2005, around Thanksgiving or Christmas. I don't remember, but I introduced myself after the gig and laid a CD on him, an album I recorded in Chicago called Letter to Hampton. And I remember saying, man, I wish I would have known you when I was doing the song 13 Below Zero. I was dreaming I had Jim McCarty playing on this song.
That was a good CD. I get a lot of CDs from people that, here and there. And most of them don't do much for me. I put Pat's CD on the next day, and I was impressed, not with just the singing, but the songwriting. It was good songwriting and good singing. So that stuck in my mind right out of the gate from the first time we met.
Yeah, and I guess about 5 years later, I'd been coming around. I started to I was in contact with Jim's guitar tech at first, and he said, Jim listens to your CD all the time. And I said, he does? I said, well, I can't believe it. I go,
I told him to tell me.
He told him to tell me to say. I said, would he come and would he let me sing a couple songs with him next time I'm in town? And he said, sure. So I went to Jim was hosting a jam somewhere, and I sat in with him.
In the Blue Goose.
Yeah, or Freddy's. Yeah. And then I lined up a gig for my Chicago band at Freddy's based on a couple guest appearances I made with Jimmy. But unfortunately, before the gig could happen, the owner passed away. So Jim said, why don't you come down to the Blue Goose? You're going to be in town that weekend, and you can be on my show, and I'll give you a few bucks to sing. And so that's when we started playing in 2010.
Yeah, I was crazy enough to give you money?
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Anyways.
I must have still been drinking back then.
The rest is history. Yeah, we both were probably. Anyways.
So you spent like 23 years in Chicago, correct?
I did. Yeah, I went there. I moved there initially to go to graduate school to attend Loyola University Chicago. And I got my master's degree, and I kind of dropped out to I was playing at the checkerboard at night, and I was going to classes.
That's where you get your education.
That was my college of musical knowledge, was the checkerboard lounge on 43rd Street.
Wow.
And I would just threw myself into the music and the scene. And in 1996, I got a residency at the checkerboard, being the house band every Wednesday night. And I met so many great players. John Primer is an old friend,
Sure.
Vance Kelly. John was doing Monday nights when I was doing Wednesdays, and Vance Kelly would do Thursday nights. So we were like the three house bands with rotating acts coming in through the weekend, like Magic Slim or, all the big guys. I saw Magic Slim so many times when I moved to Chicago. He was the fucking greatest. I mean, he had such a raw sound that it was really exciting to see. And he was such a just huge, he was like 6'4", huge big guy, 300 pounds.
Well, you were in the blues mecca.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the center of the blues scene.
Yeah. Slim would do Blue Mondays sometimes, and Lefty Diz was still alive then. And Lefty was a character and a Chicago legend. So
wow.
I got to meet James Cotton. It was Phil Guy, all the guys I got to meet in the time. Toronzo Cannon played in my band with me. We did gigs together for 7 or 8 years,
No kidding.
Toronzo's enjoying he's having a lot of success now with Alligator.
Oh, yeah.
So it's fantastic.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned to me that you and Jim have worked together doing shows and festivals since around 2010. It sounds like you guys really have a good thing going. You have a good chemistry, yeah?
Yeah, so we understand each other. It's one of those things. It either falls in pretty much right out of the gate or it doesn't. And with me and Pat, it was just smooth sailing. It was never a problem.
And Jim plays super high energy, and that's kind of in my wheelhouse too. So we kind of, when the two of us can, and the band is so with Dylan and Marvin and Emmanuel and, Jim's group is so tight. They play all the time. So it's a lot of fun. I know when I get up there for these shows with Mystery Train, I know the guys got it covered. I'm not worried about what's happening behind me. I just have to worry about, focusing and really getting down and bringing the energy to the people and the stage. It's like I don't have any. I know these guys are total pros. They got it locked down. There's nothing in the back of my mind like, oh, this is that one change where the bass player always goes to the bridge instead of the chorus. So, I don't have something in the back of my mind, which is constant fear that I had when I was in Chicago. We always playing with guys that were kind of under rehearsed and just going. I mean, it was just the nature of the business, But so these guys are really, all the groups here in Detroit are so well rehearsed. You really got to be on your game,
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of my favorite pieces where I saw Jim McCarty working with somebody else was Larry McRae came up there a couple of years ago to the Token, which of course, he comes up to the Token pretty regular. And McCarty was on stage with him and they did Something on Your Mind. And I was blown away, Jim, at the way you and Larry worked together on that song. It was such a cohesive sound,
Yeah, the Token, I play the Token a fair amount.
Yeah.
With just got done playing it recently with Walter Trout.
Yep.
And it was nice seeing Walter here. We weren't sure he was going to make it, but it was nice to see him. Coco Montoya, a dear friend of mine. I played with Coco more than once over at the place. But those guys will usually end up calling me up to play, somewhere during the course of their set. And you're talking about, professionals. These guys know what they're doing,
Yes,
so
sir.
it's no problem whatsoever.
Yep. And I wanted to ask about musical collaborations. Have you and Pat done some musical collaborations together?
You mean recording wise?
Yeah.
I've recorded 2 or 3 tunes with Pat on his CDs. Yeah, this latest one back in '69 is probably the best thing we've ever done. He wanted something psychedelic, and I said back in '69 I was doing acid, so I gave him something psychedelic, and he loved it. Yeah, it's an ass-kicking song.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. I've heard it, and I absolutely love it. I can't wait for the album, man. Pat, talk about this.
Well, we were glad to have Jim come in again and do this song. And I mean, as long as I'm making records and Jim's still around to play, I'm going to ask him to do at least one song with us if he would. And
well, yeah.
So far, he's been happy to honor that. But back in '69 was such a jam. I told Jim, I go, when you come to the studio, man, he goes, I go, this is a heavy track. I said, I want you to bring a tube screamer. I want you to bring your scrambler. He looked at me, he goes, I don't know, Pat, that might be too heavy. I said, don't tell me what's too heavy. Because I want to rock. Like, I just want to have like one heavy piece of thundering summer rock and roll. And he delivered it. He's the boss, right?
Nice.
And he came with some nice suggestions regarding the arrangement. He's like, oh, maybe you cut that section or move it over here, whatever. It was a delight. I mean, I work with guys who come to the studio and don't even bother to listen to the song, much less show up knowing the song and have a couple ideas to suggest, and then he brings the thunder like he always does.
He got me a copy of that tune. I'm listening to it for a couple of days, and then it dawns on me. I called him. I said, back in '69, things were fine as wine. I said, back in '69, you were 5 years old, Pat.
I was born in '69. It's an origin story. That's. I wanted to get I wanted to get that heavy guitar sound. You know, when Led Zeppelin 1 came out in 1969, it was sort of a game changer. And a lot of tunes got a lot of, in the MC5, a lot of guitars got a lot heavier. And this is the guy. He's like one of the, you know, he's one of the OGs. So I'm like, I know Jim. I think this would be perfect for him. And we wrote it with him in mind, you know, just give him some big fat power chords to rip out.
Came on nice.
And let him go crazy on the solo. So anyways, I'm super happy. I hope the tune finds an audience, and you know, it's always fun. And I got 9 more songs that we tracked during the original sessions, and we're Josh Ford, who's my co-writer and co-producer, and I are working on putting the finishing touches on those other 9 songs. We did a session with background vocals last weekend with Tina Howell and Ashley Stevenson. Some young lady's been singing with me over 20 years. And we're looking forward to adding a horn section on 3 or 4 tunes, and then we'll be set. So aside from Jim McCarty working with you on this album, who else have you had come in and be a part of that? I've had the pleasure of recording with Corki Siegel in Chicago. Okay. Corki played harmonica on a number called Mona that I did. He gave me a harmonica solo.
I played with the Siegel Schwall Blues Band.
Yeah. Tell about that. That was like, what was it? When you moved out to California, or you went to California?
No. I was still in Detroit. I went to Chicago. Jim Schwall was having a little bit of difficulty at the time. So yeah, we went out to California. That was before. When was that? It was before Buddy Miles, I think. Yeah, so it would have been like around 1968.
Okay.
Yeah. Corki was a lot of fun. You know who was on drums with that band? Sam Lay.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. Corki is
one of the greatest Chicago shuffle drummers that ever come.
I sent Corki the new song, and he's like, "Oh, tell my friend Jim McCarty, tell my old friend Jim." I said, "Hi, Jim. Corki is one of the most positive people I've ever met." And the first time I talked to him, I walked away like, what's wrong with that guy? I'm like, he's so nice and so just always like super positive. I'm like, I was suspicious right away just because I was a bitter person or whatever, you know. So, but Corky's a beautiful dude, and was excited to hear the new song and pass along his regards to Jim and everything.
Him I said hi.
I will for sure. I will.
Very cool. Jim, I've got a question for you that was sent to me by one of my good friends over here at the Capital Area Blues Society, Roger Gentry. Wanted me to ask if you have any comments on the Buddy Miles Express and your relationship with Buddy.
Well, I've been fortunate enough to play with 3 of the greatest drummers in the business. Johnny B. Bedanjic from Mitch, Ryder, and Troy Wills, Buddy Miles, and Carmine Appice and Cactus. And Buddy was basically a 2/4 R&B drummer, but he's certainly the loudest drummer I've ever played with. And Carmine's no slouch in that department. But Buddy was like a force of nature. He was a big man, and he'd get behind the drums, and he was doing all the singing too. And you're going to sing from behind the drums. That's rough. But the guy just was a powerhouse, you know. So that was the reason I kind of joined the band. I came to LA with Corki Siegel. We were playing, I think we were playing the Whiskey. I'm not sure. I can't remember. Yeah, I think it was the Whiskey. And Buddy was just putting he had left the Electric Flag, Michael Bloomfield's band. He was putting his own group together, the Buddy Miles Express. He was a big Mitch, Ryder, and Troy Wills fan, and he asked me to join the group. And I was intrigued about the idea of playing with the horn section. And that's why I went that way.
How did you meet Buddy? Through Bloomfield?
He came to the gig. He came to the Whiskey A Go-Go.
Wow.
When you were playing with Mitch?
When you were playing with Siegel Schwall? With Siegel Schwall, with Corki.
Okay.
And he talked to me about putting this band together, you know. And I was intrigued about the idea of playing with a big band, the horn section. Some of those guys, Virgil Gonzalez, the baritone player in that section, the original horn section, worked with Billie Holiday. These guys were some heavy-duty horn players. And I was intrigued by the bass player, Billy Rich. Bass player and Herbie Rich were both from Omaha, where Buddy was from. And Billy was just a monster bass player. Unbelievable. So I went that way.
Very cool. Hey, Jim, I wanted to ask you because we asked Pat, have you got anything in the hopper, stuff you're working on, a new CD, something like that down the way?
Not at the present moment. I've been doing a lot of acoustic stuff lately. I have my acoustic. I don't know which of my CDs you may or may not have. I have the acoustic CD that I put out during the pandemic. We weren't working very much, and I didn't play that much electric guitar when that was going on. So I played a lot of acoustic. And then I think it was the summer of 2021. I recorded some of the ideas I had, and I loved the sound of the old Gibson Dove so much that I did a whole album of acoustic music, all finger picking. Nobody's ever heard this sort of thing from me before, and it came out lovely.
Okay.
The CD before that was another CD that I did myself called "Talking to Myself," and
now I believe I have that one.
I basically play everything on that one. All the guitars and the bass and the drums. I took the guitars and the bass tracks over to my engineer's place, and we put them into the Pro Tools, and then I recorded real drums to the guitars and the bass. That came out really nice. I got nice reviews on both of those CDs.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to have to get
initially, Jim was going to call that album "Playing with Myself," but I said, Jim, maybe you want to go with.
Yeah, my girlfriend didn't appreciate that. Playing with myself.
I knew this was going to go. I knew this was going to go fun.
Yeah.
Well, guys, listen. You are about to storm the stage at the Michigan BluesFest coming up on September 21st in Lansing. And I got to be honest, there's more than a few of us here in the Lansing area that are really stoked, and we're looking forward to having you. What kind of plans do you have for your set? You got something high energy, something that's going to really rock the stage?
It's going to be an ass-kicking set. We don't do anything but that.
Yeah.
Right out of the gate, you'll get the message.
And we're
awesome.
And we're here to, to honor Jim's legacy. So we're doing tracks for all his career, and we'll do some Rockets hits and a Mitch Ryder number. We have a track that we've recorded together. Boulder City Breakdown is going to be on the set list.
Yeah, that's right.
Nice.
Some slow blues. It's going to be. We're going to blow the roof off the place. I don't know who has to follow us. That's none of my concern. we're going to do our best to make it difficult to do so.
Well, gentlemen, this is where you get your chance to shine. Where can people find out more about each of you? If you have any websites, any Facebook pages to share, this is where you get to share that. Jim, we'll start with you.
Yeah, my Jim McCarty 3, the number 3 at gmail.com. And my girl, Sally O'Malley, she takes care of all that stuff for me.
Facebook.
Okay.
Facebook.
What about your Facebook?
Yeah.
4 different pages.
Yeah.
That's Sally in the background, isn't it?
That is. Yeah. Jim has
send emails.
Yeah. Jim. You can contact Jim through Facebook.
Sally's my right arm.
He's got 4 pages on Facebook: Cactus, Jim McCarty, and Jim McCarty. 3.
All right. So if you search for Jim McCarty, you're liable to find at least one of his pages, right?
Yes.
Right. You may also find Jim McCarty, the former drummer of the Yardbirds. It's a different guy altogether. So you have to really...
Well, that's why we do the 3. Jim McCarty 3.
Okay. Pat, how about you, man? Where's your stuff located?
Well, I'm on Facebook too. I have a website, patsmillie.com. Where I keep all my show dates available, and you can check out my music there as well. And I have a residency going. I play the first Saturday of every month in Detroit at a place called Nancy Whiskey's. It's in the Corktown neighborhood.
I remember that place.
Yeah. And so we're there on the first Saturday of every month with a group called the Soul Brothers. It's a 5-piece group. We got a tenor saxophone player, keyboard. We do some old Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels. We do a lot of Detroit music, 60s soul-based stuff with a few of my originals mixed in. It's a fun night.
Nice. Well, Jim McCarty, Pat Smillie, thank you both so much for joining me today on Time Signatures, guys. It's truly been my pleasure to have you, and we are looking forward to seeing you guys at Michigan BluesFest.
It's our pleasure. Thank you very much. We'll see you at the festival.
Thank you, buddy.
Bye.
All right, guys. Well, that wraps up this edition of Time Signatures with Jim Ervin. Once again, my sincere thanks to Jim McCarty and Pat Smillie. But I also want to thank you for taking time to join us today, because if it weren't for you, none of this would be possible. Jim Ervin reminding you that keeping the blues alive is everyone's responsibility, but preserving the history of the blues one story at a time, that's my mission. Until next time, so long.
This has been Time Signatures with Jim Ervin, presented by the Capital Area Blues Society in Lansing, Michigan. For more information on cabs, visit capitalareablues.org. You can find this episode and past episodes at lccconnect.org. The Time Signatures theme song, Michigan Roads, is used by permission and was written by Root Doctor, featuring Freddie Cunningham.
You know I'm trying, baby, driving up and down these Michigan roads, yeah.
Until next time, keep on keeping the blues alive.